Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Bridger of Worlds podcast. I'm your host, Ioannis Kokkinos. Thank you so much for joining me. If you're on YouTube watching, thank you for tuning in. And if you're on one of the podcast platforms, thank you for tuning in as well. So I'm actually recording this episode on the day of the full moon in Capricorn. Now, this is not going to be an astrology forecast or anything like that, because you will be seeing this episode sometime in August. So there's no point in talking about this full moon currently happening while you see this episode in August. However, I do want to talk about the astrological archetype of Capricorn as well as Cancer, because they are the two opposing polarities on this axis in astrology. This also ties in with last week's episode with the hero's journey and the mother archetype in relationship to the father archetype. That's Capricorn and Cancer. And then I want to bring in some Capricornian themes like purpose, destiny. I'm going to talk a little bit about the astrological wheel because, as I mentioned, the hero's journey, it is a circular journey. The astrological wheel in itself is a hero's journey as well, right? We start with Aries, we move through each and every sign and end up in Pisces. That is a journey in itself for the soul. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the logos of the Christian teachings, also the Platonic teachings, as well as Dharma of the Eastern teachings, because they are actually the same. And this will all come together in a nice, delicious, juicy meal as I bridge the worlds, right? So, I am really tuning into this full moon today, and I'm feeling really called to talk about Capricorn and Cancer and really what this axis means as far as the human psyche is concerned, because that's what astrology is. It dissects the human psyche into 12 pieces. The 12 zodiac signs represent the human psyche and the human expression. Obviously, this is not that episode, but just to give you a little bit of context. And the astrological wheel, which starts with Aries, then we see Cancer, which is the lowest house, which is the fourth house in the wheel. And then opposite Cancer is Capricorn, the 10th house, which is the highest house in the astrological wheel. And this is significant. So, Cancer is associated with the mother, the womb, the gestation energy of life, the primordial water, right? It's the first water sign of the zodiac. And then Capricorn, which is actually a feminine archetype. We often associate Capricorn with the father, but there's a reason we do that. But essentially, Capricorn is a feminine energy because it is an earth sign. Water and earth in astrology represent feminine, and air and fire represent masculine. So let's get into Capricorn because it is the full moon today, and this is really the nature of the episode. Why it is associated with the father, but it is a feminine energy. Well, Capricorn represents our soul mission, what we are here to discover and achieve as part of the human condition. This ties in back to what I was saying last week as far as the great adventure and moving out into the great unknown as part of the hero's journey and realizing God, realizing through strife and through struggle that we get to grow out of ourselves and beyond ourselves. That is actually what Capricorn represents, and that's why we often associated Capricorn with the father. But it is a feminine energy because feminine is earth. It is the material experience. So all of this happens, all of this realization does in fact happen through the human condition, the human body, and being out in the physical world. So just like any polarity on any axis, we can see that Capricorn and Cancer, yes, are opposites, but they actually complement each other. Cancer needs Capricorn and Capricorn needs Cancer, just like all the other astrological opposites. So Cancer is the mother, right? And then we want to experience the father as we move out into the world. But in experiencing the father through God realization and purpose realization, we also ultimately experience the mother. Because as an archetype, remember the feminine, the mother is matter. Mother comes from the word matter. Matter, mater in Latin, right? So matter is mother. And as we move into the great unknown, into the great adventure, and realize our purpose and destiny, this ultimately reflects back the mother because this is all happening as part of the human condition. The father is the spiritual aspect, is the intangible and the invisible, right? Is God. So we cannot have one without the other. And destiny is a very big word, but some souls do incarnate in this lifetime and many lifetimes to experience a form of destiny. And this very much resonates with the logos. Now, we don't often see the word destiny next to logos. Logos, as part of the Christian teachings, which I talked about some episodes back, represents the beauty, the harmony, and the grand orchestra that is life and everything working in synergy, that everything has a reason, right? So reason and purpose are synonymous. So life has a reason, right? Life has a logos to create, and that reason is love. That reason is unity and also coming apart. Life creates and takes, destroys, births, offers, collapses, rebuilds, right? This play on duality is a part of life. And within that reason, within that play of life is the why, right? Like when we ask the question why, it really means what is the reason. When we ask the question why, what is the reason? And a lot of us are seeking what is the purpose? What is the reason for life? Like, why are we here, right? And it is at a personal level, we are to actually answer that by realizing a certain purpose that we have. What is my purpose? What is your purpose? What is your why? What is my why? Right? That is very much linked to purpose and to destiny. And then if we look to the east, we have Dharma, which there's no direct translation as to what Dharma means in English, but in Sanskrit, it does translate to truth. And truth has very much to do with what is true at your deepest, most soulful level. So in the Christian teachings, Jesus Christ was represented as the Logos. Jesus was basically Logos incarnate. And we also know the Logos as the word, right? And the word basically means information, that everything's actually orchestrating and communicating and working together through information. Like, how does a flower know what it's supposed to do? How does the grass know what it's supposed to do? How does the bird know what it's supposed to do? How do we know what we're supposed to do, right? So all that has very much to do with cosmic divine intelligence, and that is the precursor of physical life, right? Before any physical life existed, it was all energetic life. It was information. It was consciousness. So logos is consciousness. That's why we call logos the word, because the word is information. We communicate through words. So does the universe. So what is the destiny of the universe? What is the purpose of the universe? Well, it is to evolve. It is to keep evolving. We've understood through research and looking back in our history that the world, the universe, the cosmos has been evolving for billions of years. And within those billions of years of evolution, life has completely been destroyed and restarted again. And only God knows what the future of humanity is. But the common denominator, if we look back to all these years of existence, is evolution. So purpose and destiny have very much to do with going beyond ourselves, going into the unfamiliar and into the uncomfortable. That is how we evolve. And where there is discomfort, where it is not familiar, this is where we get to grow the most. And we learn something there. And we learn that lesson, and then we are to share that lesson, which is what I talked about last week with the hero's journey. So when we are moving through the astrological wheel and we come to that 10th house, which is the highest point in the chart, it actually is the position where the sun is the highest, right? And the sun represents our divine consciousness. So by moving through the astrological wheel and we reach that 10th house, we realize, okay, this is my purpose. This is actually what I'm here to share with the human condition, because remember, Capricorn is an earth sign. And when you've reached this house, it represents being in your truth, being in your dharma. Now, dharma is, as I said, an Eastern teaching, and it has to do with whatever your soul is here to accomplish. You don't often hear or read this, but dharma and logos are synonymous, because logos is reason. And I have a reason to be here. I have a logos to be here, and that is to realize my purpose. Dharma is the exact same thing. At the soul level, what is my soul here to do? What is my soul here to offer? That is my dharma. And Capricorn is also associated with karma. Now, karma, we hear a lot about karma, and karma is basically the consequences of the actions we've taken. Now, the teachings say that if actually we know what our dharma is and we are not fulfilling our dharma, we will create negative karma for ourselves. So dharma and karma are very much intimately connected. But if actually we do know our dharma and we are following our dharma's path, then we'll actually create positive karma for ourselves and for those around us. Now we can go the other way. We can actually work with our karma. When we are in karmic loops, when we are living out patterns in our lives that we want to break, we know like these patterns keep coming up because we have a lesson to learn. When we break those patterns and we are actually unraveling through our karma, then we actually move closer to our dharma. So by working with dharma, we work with karma. By working with karma, we can also work with dharma, because as we unravel our karma and we learn the lessons and we break the cycles and the patterns, then we move into our dharma, which is our soul's purpose, which is what we are here to accomplish. And all of this is associated with Capricorn. It's associated with that 10th house in the astrological wheel. Now, it's not the last sign, right? We would think that, oh, the attainment of my soul's purpose, my soul's mission, I know what I'm here to do, I know what I'm here to say, is the end of the story. It's not, because just like the hero's journey, we are actually meant to take that purpose. We are meant to take that so-called destiny and share it with the rest of the world. So too do we have the 11th house and then the 12th house, which marks the end of the astrological wheel. Now, the 11th house is Aquarius and the 12th house is Pisces. Aquarius is that sharing of the knowledge. Aquarius is an air sign and is very much about social networking and relationships and social connections and patrons and just basically moving a lot of information around in order to build and create community. So we see that in the hero's journey. And then Pisces is completion. Pisces is moving back into the void, preparing for the final death, which is not really death because Pisces just signifies transcendence. It's basically the movement of one life into the next so that life can begin again through Aries and life is born again. Also, one other very interesting school of thought that is connected very much to purpose and destiny is our daemon. So I talked about the soul, right? Dharma is about aligning with our soul's calling. The daemon of ancient Greece, again, this is Platonic, has very much to do with what we are here to accomplish through sacred contracts. Now, the daemon is not the demon. The daemon was taken from that context. They basically removed the A to signify a demon, which is like the lower impulse, the lower entity that drives us to do bad, naughty, evil things. The daemon has nothing to do with that. The daemon is actually synonymous with our soul. Our soul is here to deep dive into the unknown. Our soul is here to be wild and feral because our soul is our wild nature. Now, this has become incredibly distorted and warped and, twisted through centuries of trauma, cultural and religious conditioning, but our animal nature is actually synonymous with our soul. Our soul does need to spiritually awaken because that wildness can run amok, and we basically need to anchor it within our bodies and our spirit, because it is only when soul meets spirit can we fully come into ourselves. And I did talk about the soul and the spirit in the 4 pillars of manifestation episode, so do touch base with that. But the daemon is basically that wild part of us that we've severely repressed because of severe miscommunication and misunderstanding that our wild nature is something that is bad, negative, and evil. Now, our wild can do a lot of damage, and this, of course, is, let's say, what the demon is, right? When we have compulsive behaviors, when we have addictions, when we want to hurt or harm another, when we want to, basically evoke some form of pain onto ourselves or onto others. This is the expression of the shadow, which is synonymous to, let's say, demon. But the shadow and the soul are not the same, right? So just like the shadow and the soul are not the same, the demon and the daemon are not the same. The daemon is wild. The daemon is very impulsive. The daemon is wanting to experience all sorts of things inside this body. But the daemon is about soul realization. The daemon is about basically hearing the inner call. So let's say we're called to move somewhere and we can't explain why. Let's say we're called to quit our day job and we don't know why. Let's say we're called to go to a certain retreat and we don't know why. This is our daemon. This is our soul telling us this is what you need to do in order to go to the next level. Because the soul, the daemon, all they want for us, it's one, the soul and the daemon are one. All it wants is for us to evolve. Our soul incarnated to evolve, to learn specific lessons. And the soul will do whatever it needs to do in order to learn those lessons. So even though destiny is a big word, right? It's a word we often hear in like epic movies and stories and myths. It is very relevant to our mundane human life. But destiny doesn't fall on our laps. Our purpose does not fall on our laps. We are to move through levels. We are to answer whatever call we have, even if we don't understand it. In fact, we don't understand the call most of the time because the soul knows it will grow in the unknown and in the unfamiliar. That is where the growth is for the soul, for the daemon, to find its logos, to find its reason, to align with its dharma. Moving from the familiar and the comfortable of Cancer and into the unfamiliar and the uncomfortable of Capricorn in order to realize destiny, in order to realize purpose. So I wanted to bring all of this to the table today because I think it ties in very well with what I was talking about last week. There is a lot of trial and error when it comes to answering the call. For those of you moving through the hero's journey, I applaud you and I commend you because it is probably the most difficult and challenging thing that any human can ever move through. And it is incredibly personal and unique to every soul that is moving through the hero's journey. Often there is travel involved. It is a deep dive truly into the unknown. It is moving somewhere. It is going into unfamiliar territory and places. Has very much to do with leaving home and leaving the life you knew and retrieving something, reclaiming something that you could not have done so otherwise. So I'll leave it here. I think that's enough food for thought for today. I do believe this episode is setting up next week's episode. I already have an idea of what it is I want to talk about, so stay tuned for that. Thank you for being on this journey with me. Thank you for being here. If you're on YouTube watching, please hit that like, subscribe button. I so greatly appreciate that. I do have all my socials posted below. If you're on one of the podcast platforms, share the content if you so feel called. You can send me a text. I'd love to hear from you. I will be back next week. As always, a brand new episode every Thursday. And in closing, please remember that you are the medicine and I am just the messenger. Thank you very much.